All right, here we are. This is a long-awaited podcast episode.
It sure is, Dr.
Yeah.
Ryan. It sure is. Ha-
Ever since I met this pipsqueak, Kyle Tiermann, this rugrat. How old were you when we met?
I think that when we met, I was 27 and I'm 35
27.
now. I
So
think
now
that
you,
was I was about a year into my podcast when I
right.
reached out to you. Uh, and I didn't didn't know anything, man. Didn't know anything. I remember and when I first met you, the day we met, you said, "Oh, you're a surfer. I have a friend named Neil Strauss who's learning how to surf. Maybe you could take him surfing." So the first day you and I met, we went down to Malibu, and I
Mm.
don't know if you remember this, but you hung out on the rock, and I went out surfing with Neil.
Was Kaj Larson with us?
Nope, but that night it was a whole LA day, man. And then we went up to your house in Topanga. And then that night, we went down to what is that pretentious restaurant club down there? Soho. That was
Soho House? Yeah,
Soho
yeah.
House, and then we went and had dinner with Kaj. It was a whole LA day.
Oh, all right.
I slept in your van. I think did. I sleep? No, you didn't have the van by then. You.
Hmm.
I think that was an after. I remember you got Scarlett Johansson after we met.
Really? Huh. Anyway, what I was going to say is it kind of felt like even back then that someday you were going to write a book, and here we are. It's happened.
Yeah, man. It sure has. Long awaited. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it feel that way? Like, did I say early on that I wanted to write a book?
I don't know if you said it, but um, you know, you're a guy with an agenda. You, you're a guy who shows up with a checklist and intentions, whether they're explicitly stated or not. And I felt like, one of your intentions was, you've always been very interested in the process of writing and like, okay, so how do you do this? And, do you write 2 hours every morning or do you just write when inspiration comes? Or, here's what, Stephen King says, here's what, what's his name? The guy you always follow with all his fucking 5 actionable steps to every fucking thing. What's his name? The fucking
Tim
West Coast.
Ferriss?
Huh?
Tim Ferriss?
Yeah, Tim Ferriss. That's
Tim
right.
Ferriss.
You're always kind of trying to figure shit out, and one of the things I felt like you were figuring out was, could I make a living as a writer, and how would I do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you've been chipping away at that consistently for years now, and so it kind of makes sense that it would culminate in a book, at least
Yeah.
one book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I remember before I met you, I didn't really have a lot of other models for people who were making a living as writers. Like it's,
And then you met Neil Strauss, and
and
you're
I know
like,
it was like two in one day. I was like, Jesus
yeah,
Christ, this is.
fuck that Chris Ryan
The
model.
takeaway from this is I got to write about sex if I want to make a living because these are the two sex guys who are making it happen. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that f- before you and I had met, I was uh, writing for a local magazine in Santa Cruz called Santa Cruz Waves, a surf mag, and uh, I don't know if you remember this, but I brought you down an issue of an article about pro surfing being a dead end career that I had written, and it was like it was a very uncomfortable article for me to write because it was
Yeah.
about a lot of people who I saw growing up in my hometown who had kind of put all their eggs in this surfing basket and then were 35 with no job experience, living in their parents' garages and uh I just remember growing up in that town and it's you've been there. It's an incredible place, but surfing is the thing to do in Santa Cruz. Like it's whatever. It's like Texas football or something like that, right? Where
Right.
it is where all the status is derived from, right? So you can, I think when you grow up in a culture where there's so much focus on one thing, you can sort of put too much emphasis on that thing because you're getting social capital from it, right? It's like what people do with social media now, where you're spending all your time on social media because you're getting followers, but it's not like really necessarily leading toward anything, but people don't know how to get out of it because we're a species that gravitates towards that kind of affirmation. And for me, I think it was really there was a moment, I think right around meeting you, where I was afraid that I wasn't going to get out of that. Like
Mm.
I just wasn't the whole. And I mean, I have great friends, and I love Santa Cruz. I go back there all the time, but it just felt like this vortex that I was in. That I was every time I tried to get out, and I would go on trips, but then I would always go back to Santa Cruz, and it was because status was there, and it was just like it was comfortable. I have youngest of five brothers and sisters, all live in Santa Cruz. Like it was just easy to be there. uh,
Yeah.
and I remember, yeah, I mean, I remember meeting you and then starting to spend more time down in Topanga with you and feeling like it was just this new world that was opening up to me, and a more interesting life ahead if I just continued to kind of like push in that direction. Um, and I felt like I needed a model of like, okay, how can you actually make a living as a writer? Like because that's what I think what writing does for me, right? Is it gives me an excuse to go into worlds that I otherwise would have no business being in, right? Like that's what is so cool for me about being a journalist is you're like, holy shit, I know nothing about this world, and now all you people are talking to me. And it's the same with what a podcast does, like
Right.
probably what you get with a podcast is like, holy shit, I'm talking with a bank robber now, like, and we're having a good conversation. So that was the feeling that I was going after, and I think a lot of my life has been based around trying to figure out how I can keep that going and not just get pulled back into the comfort zone.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Santa Cruz is definitely a place that would be easy to get trapped in. It's very comfortable, and it's the kind of place when people hear you live there, everyone's like, "Woo, you're so lucky, Santa Cruz. That's so awesome." And you can start. I was thinking recently about how one of life's most sort of sneaky traps is when you have the opportunity to have something that other people think would be awesome to have, but it's not right for you. It's really hard to walk away from it because all the external validation is saying, no, that's the thing. Like, you're a pro surfer who lives in California, dude,
Yeah.
you've got it made, right? And
Right.
then, but you from inside, you're like, it's not really what they think it is. Um, yeah, and it's hard. That's a hard decision to make to move away from something that everyone else thinks you should hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it takes, or took for me a lot of just like personal reflection, Like I think also part of this was that, I was living in a sweet little surf shack for $700 a month, right near a good wave, in a comfortable relationship. And um, it really took, yeah, thinking about where I wanted to be focusing my energy over the next 10 years. And I think also, it's a weird, I've always felt like more of a writer than a surfer, if that makes like that I've always felt more like when I'm writing, I'm in the cockpit of what I should actually be doing.
Hmm.
Whereas surfing always felt like oh, I love doing this. It's super fun. It's, it's athletic. I have a friend group here, but no one was ever taking me by the shoulder when I was a kid and being like, dude, you have a real talent and gift at this. Like it
Hmm.
always felt like I grew up in this place, so by happenstance I got pretty good at it. But I
Mm.
never felt like I had a like a real deep knack for that thing. And I
Right.
remember yeah, I mean, I think a lot changed for me when you and I started hanging and I mean, like we have a similar love for story and like the craft of story and trying to um kill the sacred cows and figure out what's real and being on the edge of what's taboo. Like that for me has always felt closer to what my spirit is than just being like a an athletic guy. And I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, they have a hard time. Uh, I remember my friend Charlie told me recently, he's like, when I met you, I didn't know whether to classify you as an athlete or an intellectual. And like, I had a hard time figuring out what it was that you were. So
And then he realized you're just a
I'm
dumbass.
neither. I'm neither. Yeah,
Neither one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're just a pretentious asshole. Uh, but
Well, this is a good segue to the book. I mean, which is ostensibly the point of this particular podcast episode to promote Kyle's book,
uh,
ladies and gentlemen. Which okay, little smoke up the ass blowing here. It's really really fucking good. Whether like even if like your parents are dead or you hate them and you never want to talk to them again, the book is only I would say it's only superficially about the sort of techniques of interviewing your parents and all that. It's so much deeper than that. And I hope people won't look at the cover and the the blurbs or whatever and think, oh well, I'm not doing a podcast. I don't really want to interview my parents. I don't see the point. It's it's a memoir. It's a story of a really interesting family, yours. It's a coming of age story. It's like it's there's so much going on in it. And the reason the segue that presented itself to me was when you talked about being on the edge of taboo and how like that like you wrote things in this book that as a fellow writer I really felt like wow, that took some balls to write that. That's very revealing. That's very intimate, that's courageous. Like there you took a lot of risks in that book, which don't necessarily you don't know that looking at it. You don't know that going in. It looks like it might be something totally different, but it's way deeper and way more complex than I expected.
thanks, man. That you know how much that means to me. So thanks. Yeah. What was um yeah. I'm curious. It's funny if you've done this a few times, but like what actually people resonate with in a book because I was so close to it for so long. It's really hard for me to even know what people like about it. Um
Yeah.
but I don't know what was surprising to you, I guess that you
Well, I mean, just how personal it is,
yeah.
and I mean, I knew I've met both your parents and your stepfather, and so I kind of had a sense of what your family was like and what your childhood was like, and um, and obviously I knew you, so it's not that there were a lot of surprises for me, but reading it as a general reader who doesn't know you personally, who thinks this is a book about, how to interview your parents and why you should. I forget if that's the subtitle. Um, uh, I was struck by like, whoa, no, this is about a particular man, a particular childhood, particular mother, particular father, particular stepfather. Like this is a very Um, yeah, it's like, who is it? Christopher Hitchens, I think, said that we should always write posthumously.
Yeah.
We should write as if we have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to just tell it all. And I felt like you made these decisions of like, I'm going to tell my story as transparently as possible with as much vulnerability as I can muster, which is always what I think people should aspire to, but you pulled it off.
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? That's the scary part. I had to write the first draft of the book was very glib and it was
Mm,
very copywriter style. Like, well, if you do this, then this will happen. And the way I initially thought about how I was going to do the book was a very much a how-to book, right? Like I had
right.
my dad, E.T., Eric Thiermann, I had him on the pod uh, in 2021 during COVID. He's this classic old dude who the tangentialites would they fucking love ET. He goes to the flea market every weekend. He haggles. He's got a hot air balloon that he bought off a hitchhiker in his garage. Just like a good salt of the earth dude who's spent the last 30 years making documentaries. Like one of the stories that I write in the book that I think is a very fun kind of telling story is he was at an Apple event, I believe in the 1990s, and Muhammad Ali was there. Muhammad Ali was already pretty far along in his disease and shaking rather badly. And E.T. went up to Muhammad Ali with like a mirror before this interview to be like, hey, check yourself out. And my dad's a lifelong magician, and it was a gag mirror that starts like laughing at Muhammad Ali. And like the whole crowd just goes fucking silent, like, oh my God, like Muhammad Ali's, and then Muhammad Ali just like cracks up. My dad gives him the mirror, like totally just my brother said it in the book. Like my dad doesn't treat a billionaire like a billionaire. He doesn't treat a homeless guy like a homeless guy. He's just very solid. And initially, I did the interview with my dad for the podcast. I got a bunch of emails from people who wanted to interview their own parents. So I thought, oh, that could be really fun idea for a book. There's clearly a little signal boost here of interest. And then as I started writing that first draft, yeah, it was very like, well, this is what you do. You do this and that. And I um, felt like I was hiding the vulnerability through like glib jokes. And I can do
Right.
that kind of writing where every line is a beep boppy joke. And personally, I actually kind of hate that writing. And you see a lot of comedians struggle with books because they're afraid to go a page or two without a laugh. And it's
Mm.
just boom, 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 boom. And it was really through, I mean, you read some drafts. Neil Strauss read some drafts, and Neil really called me out on it. He's like, can't you can't hide. You tell me how you really feel here. So I wrote another draft that then got into like how I felt about my mom and my stepdad falling to conspiracy theories. And there was a huge anger like that I had pent up around the complexity of those relationships and the love that I feel for them and also the resentment that I feel for not just them but culture, and seeing so many older people fall into really crazy things about the world that are not true, and that see people like my mom and stepdad invest a ton of money and a ton of time into real quixotic endeavors. And I then wrote that next draft in a very angry fashion. So it was almost like I had to give myself permission to let that anger out on the page. And then through another third draft kind of pull it back and figure out, okay, what's just mean for the sake of being mean versus what's true, and what will help a reader connect with this story. But it really took that was part of my own process, was just giving myself permission to be mad and put it out on the page.
Yeah, it makes me think of Hemingway's line that writing is rewriting,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I'm talking about. That process of the third draft where you said, okay, the feelings are on the page. Now, which ones are going to stay and which ones do I pull out? Which is, another Hemingway line, kill your babies, right? Like, yeah, I know it felt really good to write that. And I know you've got an emotional connection to that paragraph, but it doesn't serve the book. Pull it, kill it. And that's hard to do. And it's really hard. I mean, I think this is the thing about writing that can be so growth promoting in the writer, that it's so hard for us to see our blind spots and to see our irrationalities and to burst that bubble of anger that's been festering there for years and years. You might not even know it's there until
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
start writing that chapter,
totally.
and then you're like, holy fuck, where'd that come from?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally. And you don't, it doesn't happen before you start the session.
right,
Like that's the punchline, is that you don't have the feeling and then think, "Oh, I'm going to get this out on the page." You start creaky and these half sentences are coming out and you're like, "This is weird. I don't know where it's going." And then all of a sudden, 35 minutes in, you hit something, and there's this deeper uh emotion that was just sitting there that comes out. And I think that
right,
for just generally our relationship with our parents, there are a lot of those feelings that are sitting
sure,
just beneath the surface that we're not really giving ourselves the time to let out into the open. And then, one of my favorite characters in the book, I call them characters, but they're real people. But when you start writing about real people, they become characters in a book.
sure.
It's all true, but you start kind
You
of
leave
writing.
things out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my favorite characters is Rachel, Rach the Reaper, who is
Mm.
a hospice nurse. She now works in pediatric hospice, and uh, she said, you know, you really get to see people's relationship with their parents when the parents are dying, because all those feelings that the kids never dealt with come out when the parent is dying. Like they don't go away, right? And so the value of the interview process is to sort of let the pressure valve off earlier in life
Mm.
and try and find a more complete relationship with your parent when that inevitable day comes. And I can say that, having spent a, a year interviewing my mom, my dad, my stepdad multiple times, then spending another 2 years writing the book, for me that has been the personal benefit, is I do think I'm more ready for their death, and I feel more complete in how we are as two human souls on this planet. Like I feel complete and better with them. And it's I had a call the other day with Foster, my stepdad, who's someone who I really lean in pretty hard in certain areas of the book, and it was scary to write about. But it says a lot about him that he said that, I think you did a really good job on the book. There were some parts that really hurt, but I understand that you had to write them, and I felt no resentment toward him. Like I had, it's that's the power of art. I think is it really does leave you. It leaves your body when you put it out on page. I heard Neil Brennan, the comedian who I know we're we're both fans of, say that when he did his Three Mics special, which is very much about his family, his parents, he's like, it it got out of me. Like I don't
Hmm.
feel that energy anymore because I was able to put it out on stage. Um, so I think that that's the real magic of people doing art and going deeply personal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's the added layer of, if you had just done a stand-up act about your parents, which maybe you have, I'm not sure, uh, but that would have a certain kind of cleansing quality for you. But I think it's different what you did because you're confronting your discomfort and the confusion and the misunderstandings and all that. You're confronting it directly with the person in question. And, you're sitting down to talk with your mother about, why do you believe these things? And, do you realize how uncomfortable that made me? And do you realize how people see that? And, like you're, I think it's a deeper cleanse because you're doing it with the person
Mm,
that you have the issue with.
yeah.
And that's part of the value of your book, that it's not just like, here's a cool thing you can do and blah blah blah. It's This is something that will make your life and your parents' life better going forward, because what's the regret that people have on their deathbed? Oh, I wish I'd loved more. I wish I'd been less afraid to say something out loud that I've carried with me my whole life. I wish I told my mother I loved her before she died. I wish this. I wish I'd forgiven. I wish I'd been forgiven, right? Like, none of that shit happens if you don't sit down and have the conversation. And so that's what I love about the book. It's like, you're not just saying, you know, record these family heirlooms or something, you're saying, do the hard thing, and here's a way to do it. And maybe it's not hard, maybe it's not all, even in the hard cases, it's not all hard. It's, it's beautiful. And beauty is sometimes, there's difficulty involved in beauty.
Mm,
But that's what I love about it. It's really deep. It's the whole thing. Like, the way you tell your story is deep. The point of the book is deep. What you're recommending your readers do is deep. It's all really deep.
mm.
It's not like you said, your first draft being glib. I totally agree. I'm glad that Neil said it to you that way, and that you were able to hear him, because it takes it from a, like, just another fucking book somebody wrote to try to make some money or cash in on some whatever marketing opportunity they see. It takes it from that to something that I think, will actually touch people's lives in a serious way.
Thanks, man. That means a lot to me. And
Well, I mean, it's not worth writing if you're not doing that.
totally, no, it's not. I mean, and I fucking man. I mean, I remember, you and I have spent a lot of time together writing. I remember when you and I went to Baja together, and then we took our van trip back up through Slab City, and there was the night we were camping out reading old like Outside magazine stories from, I think it was like Sebastian Junger and John Krakauer and all these guys and gals that are they've been, I think all of those great writers are willing to put something on the line. Like that's the it's there needs to be it needs to feel scary to do for other people to then jump in there with you.
Right.
And I've always felt that. I've always felt like if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it in a way that feels like, holy shit, like this is scary for me. Like there's something on the line with this relationship, but I'm willing to do it because otherwise we're dancing around the real issue, and it just then becomes marketing. You know,
So, Kyle, are you saying if you're gonna surf a big
I
wave?
wouldn't do that for me. I wouldn't go that cliche. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to the what the interview process does in particular, like it gives a container for you to go a little bit deeper with your parents. And so often with conversation, we go home for holidays, Thanksgiving, it's like you get a quick little, hey, how you doing, what's been going on, all right, now we're going to check our text messages, and we're off, right? It tends to be hard to get down into what's really going on with you, or give your parents the time of day to actually tell a bit more about their story, maybe even before you were born, events that you had no idea they had even experienced, in their 20s, but before they were parents. You don't typically get into that level of conversation without dedicated time. And
Yeah.
to uh, sit down as a journalist and remove your kid cap, like remove yourself from being the role of a child, uh,
Mm,
and step into the role of journalist, I think can allow the parents to tell their story in a different way, and it can allow you to not react in your habitual child way. For some people, they might notice that when they go home for the holidays, they regress in maturity about 15 years, right? Like we all assume these roles in our lives, and the reason that it felt valuable to still make it be a book about interviewing your parents and not just say, hey, this is my story, is because I think it gives people a permission slip to play journalist. And you can ask your parents a series of questions about their lives and not necessarily react to it the way you normally would. Like
yeah.
that's the value of just giving them the space to do it. And one area that I did not expect, but like having had a lot of people interview their parents, and even what my dad said after the podcast was, "Thanks for interviewing me. It made me feel like what I had to say was important, and like you cared about it." And I think that a lot of parents feel that their kids don't really give a shit about their lives, and unless they're going to ask, that your kids are going to ask about your life, like you're not necessarily going to tell them.
Yeah. One of my favorite authors, Milan Kundera, said, I write books because my kids don't care about my opinions.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that. He's like, I connect with the this anonymous audience because the people close to me don't really want to hear the stories, or
yeah.
they've heard them already. And what's the number one? I would wager the number one complaint that kids and parents have about each other is they don't see me as a person.
Mm,
They don't see me as I am. Mom sees me as a kid.
yeah.
Dad sees me as a kid, or the kid only sees me as the father, as the authority figure, as the ATM machine, as a source of money. They don't take me seriously as a person. And I feel like what you're offering here is the opportunity to see your parent as a human being who, as you say, existed before you did. Like what was mom like as a teenager? Holy shit, let's think about that. That's a strange thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And how did some of those events shape the way that they see the world now? Right? Because
right,
we tend to flatten our parents' personalities. And I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, parents flatten their kids' personalities, right? How
right.
often, I'm a man now, you still treat me like a child, right? That's like a cliche.
Mom,
Yeah, come on.
get out of my room,
Stop
mom.
busting in, mom. Yeah. Uh,
I'm a man.
yeah, exactly. Why are you still living here? You get a job.
Man.
Yeah. I don't know why we just
Yeah.
made them from Philly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, your mom's not from Philly. What's up with
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Uh, but yeah, I think that uh, without without intention, we narrow and flatten the personalities of others. Right? It's a very lazy way to do it, but like we often see our parents in the past tense, right?
Mm,
Because for most people, about 90% of the time that they will spend in their with their parents completely in their lives will be before the age of 18. You live with your parents,
mm,
before you get your driver's license, you're going on drives with them, you're spending a lot of time with them, and then the second, boom, I got my driver's license, I'm out of the house.
mm.
You now only see them for holidays, so you have this ossified version of who your parents are that you
Yeah,
have not updated for the last 10 or 20 years. And the process of interviewing them gives them the opportunity to say, well, hey, this is who I am now. And how often do relationships, not just parent child relationships, but romantic relationships, end because we say, well, they see me in they don't take the best of me. Yeah, every time I do something, they see it as an excuse to illustrate that I'm a shitty person, right? How much of good relationships are just a willingness to see each other with a sense of goodwill and curiosity. Um, so I think that is also yeah, it just takes work. And for me, like interviewing my mom, right? She went to Berkeley in the 1960s. She was out on Telegraph Avenue when these huge protests were happening. It was during the Vietnam War. She told me stories about being at uh, a friend's house when the draft was going. And, they would spin these big wheels with these little capsules inside, where then they would pull out a birthday and unfurl the capsule, and then they would say, if your birthday got called, you were going to war. Like I had never thought about what culture was really like back in the 1960s. Except for maybe in passing. And that was, some of my favorite parts of the whole process was just to learn about what culture was like 50 years ago and to be like, wow, that's fucking crazy that you were going through that. How different technology was, what the music was like, and how did maybe that culture imprint on the way you see the world now. There's actually a
right.
lot of evidence that if you grew up during a recession, you'll be more frugal for the rest of your life. Whereas if you grew up during a bull market, you'll be more risky with your money for the rest of your life, because how the world was during your 20s is a way, like when our adult brains come online, that is often how we tend to see the world for the rest of our lives. So that I think also can give a way of broadening our empathy for our parents, right? Oh,
Yeah.
that's why they see the world this way.
Yeah, yeah, and then take it the further step to how their vision of the world then informed my vision of the world, right? So it always ends up being self-revelatory, the
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you so
Hey,
you
we're over half an hour into this and you haven't said the name of the book yet.
oh
As you
god.
know, you gotta like get
Yeah,
on that,
it's
dude.
called Sex at Dawn 2. Like
Too. Yeah. Good
Sex
luck
at Dawn.
doing media for that.
Yeah. The book name is One Last Question Before You Go.
One last question before you go.
Why you should
Yeah.
marry your parents.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to I mean the one thing I learned doing a lot of media is slip the name in,
Mm,
several times because people are going to be like, "What the hell book are they talking about?" Especially not on a podcast obviously, but if you're doing radio or whatever. And I guess you've got a bit of a media tour planned here. It looks like Patagonia is sending you out to promote the book. That's awesome.
I'm so excited. Yeah, we're gonna do a bunch of stores, Patagonia stores. We're going through California. We're going to go out to Austin, Texas, New York, Portland. Yeah, they've been really cool. And I published the book through Scribe. Have I told you at all about like because I got an agent and then got denied is the short of it. So,
Did they
uh,
pitch the book? Because the agent was into it, right?
yeah, so I wrote the book while, over a 3-year period while working as a copywriter in advertising. So that was my day job. That was how I would make money. And then every morning I would spend a couple hours writing, which I felt was pretty healthy because it didn't put the pressure on me for the book to be like the book. One last question before you go. It didn't put the pressure to need to hurry through the draft. It took
Yeah,
a long time to, okay, I'm going to write a new one. I wasn't on a deadline.
yeah,
I had certain benchmarks that I was going for. Okay, I want to get this amount done by this date. I want to get all these chapters done by however long. But I think that um, if I had just whatever quit my job, gone on unemployment for a year and tried to write the book, it would have been way too much pressure. I don't
yeah,
think my best creativity comes from white knuckling it. So I
yeah,
was happy to have been able to go at my own pace. And unless you're really famous, you're probably not going to get an advance for a book for your first book before the first draft is done. Um,
right,
and so I had a draft done. Then I went on this website called Publishers Marketplace that I would recommend for anyone who's trying to get an agent. And it's like a $20 a month subscription. You find all the agents, like names and emails there. And then I reached out to a number of agents. And one of the first that I did reach out to was from Di Fiore agency. They're like mid-sized New York agent. And this guy John Meals was like, I love it, let's do it. So it was a very quick process for me to get an agent. I think I texted you, right? I was like, fuck, it's happening, this is so sick. I flew out to New York, we got dinner, I was like, is this awesome, like this is gonna be huge, and then we put together a proposal, and pretty quickly, like HarperCollins, Macmillan, Penguin, all these, they sent it out, and pretty much the response was like, well, this is both a memoir and a how-to, and we don't know how to categorize it. So, like, we really like the writing, but it's a pass. And it was one of those things where I was like, okay, well, I had been in talks with a different model, a different kind of publisher called Scribe Media, where our friend Adam Skolnick, who's published a number of pretty big books, one very big, the David Goggins book, Can't Hurt Me, was published through Scribe. And the model there is you don't get an advance. You pay them to go through a publishing process. It's super professional, but then you get more on the back end. So I ended up going with that option. And it's just, I think that the point of all this is, if you out there are thinking of writing a book, there's not necessarily the gates that there once was. Like, self-publishing doesn't have the same kind of dirty stain on it that it once did. And there are now very big books going through this alternative model, um, because so many books are now being sold on Amazon. So you can very much do it. You just don't get the advance up front, and then you potentially get more on the back end.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to get bogged down talking about publishing, given the fact that most of the listeners aren't interested, but you know, publishing's a horrible business model for a writer. I mean, you get 8%. It's ridiculous. Like 8%. Are you kidding? Like if I'm a lumberjack, I get more than 8% of the value of the wood I cut down, you
Yeah.
know? It's ridiculous. So yeah, if I ever publish another book, it'll probably be through Scribe or something similar.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, and I would get an advance, given my stellar reputation.
Mm,
But no, I'd probably get a 6-figure advance, but I
yeah.
wouldn't. I I don't
You would get
care.
you would get an advance if you went with a bigger publisher. You mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
obviously. Yeah,
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 yeah. But yeah, but it's like such a hassle. You have to deal with so much bullshit, and you sacrifice so much control. You don't even control the title of the book, you know?
right.
It's ridiculous.
It's almost like if you were to start a business, it's the difference between taking on a bunch of venture capital early and then
Yeah,
having them own more of your company versus bootstrapping it and owning more of it once it goes to market and then getting more of that profit on the back end.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, when you're doing something that's so personal, sacrificing creative control is a big sacrifice. You know, like in my case, you know, with the books I wrote that are, you know, popular science, it's not, this isn't a question of do I include this story about my mother or not? You
Yeah.
know, like that's a
Yeah.
decision only you should make. Your editor shouldn't be making that decision.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. Um, so you're what are you going to do on these tours? You're going to do a reading and Q&A? Is that the basic idea?
And you can learn to interview your parents. I want to my goal for it is that people will bring their parents and we can do a reading, but then also we can have a bit where people like, you don't need to bring your parents, but where you can actually do a real time thing where you ask each other a few questions and kind of, because there is a craft to it, as you know, right? And most people don't learn how to ask good questions because we're not incentivized to learn that skill growing up. You know, we're always incentivized to learn how to have the right answer.
Hmm.
You're not rewarded for having the right question on the test. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's no reason why people should be good question askers. And one of the great skills of us doing podcasts is you gain that sense of like, well, how can I angle a question here so it'll open up a story for someone, right? So like one of the guys who I incorporated into the book. One last question before you go, everyone. Is child.
You're gonna make me sorry I said
Yeah, I know.
anything.
It's such a fucking long title too. Charles Duhigg, who wrote he wrote The Power of Habit, and he wrote one called Super Communicators. He talks about deep questions, so you don't just ask about the facts of your parents' lives, ask how they feel about it. Right. So the difference between um, where did you go to, what do you do for a living, and what made you want to do that will get you to those are two completely divergent roads in where it's going to give your interviewee uh, an opportunity to go, and one's going to go way deeper. So yeah, as like during the tour I want to talk about some of these different things, like how do you do a deep question, follow-up questions, just like real simple good ones to get that
Hmm.
habit going, because I also understand that for some people, like they really might not want to sit down and do an hour-long interview with their parent. And I use that question very liberally. You know, you're in the book to make that point, really, is that like anyone who you see as a mentor, anyone who you're just curious to get to know better, who is older than you can use this process and get a few of their stories down. But it could be a shorter term, like it doesn't need to be an hour long interview. You could just bust out your phone on a car ride with someone and start recording for 10 minutes and ask them a series of questions. Like this really is a skill that I believe is useful for anyone to learn, and it's not that hard, but we don't typically practice it, right? So I want that for people who just want to get a little bit better at question asking. I want the tour to be a thing where people can actually um, practice that skill too.
Would you say you've gotten most of your practice at this from podcasting or other aspects of life?
Yeah, I think that I've you know yeah, I think podcasting for sure is how I've learned the skill. Uh, but I also think that there's, for me, like a fear that I've like I remember early being like really wanting to be taken seriously. And growing up as a surfer, people sort of in by default see you as this, oh, you're like a non-serious dude who's, what do people think of? Like surfers are the cliche stupid group, right?
Mm,
Like that is oh, it's Spicoli, it's the stoners. You're not thinking deeply about things. And I would get on calls with people, and I'd be the only one that they would call dude on the call. Like, where you're like, fuck you. This is a crazy caricature of who I am as a person. So early on, I remember really wanting to be like, oh, I'm smart. I want to show people that I'm smart. And uh, I remember pretty early talking to this one gal who I had a lot of respect for, and she said, "Kyle, if you want people to think you're really smart, ask them a lot of questions about themselves.
mhm. Right.
Like you don't come away from interactions with people and talk all about yourself, make all these statements, and have them think, wow, this person's really smart. Like it is this little Aikido move to get people to open up and actually think more highly of you. So I've, yeah, I think that with the podcast, that incentivizes question asking, and then just generally in interactions, like learning how to ask better questions makes people want to spend more time with you. So I put a huge amount of value on that skill. It's not, this isn't a new idea, right? It's like Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. Like,
Right.
the point of that book is get curious and ask people questions.
Yeah. 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 It's amazing how potent it is to just shut up occasionally and listen,
Hmm.
you know? Yeah. When early podcasting days for me, a good 12, 13 years ago, one of the first things I learned was how I talk too much.
Hmm.
Because I would look at the waveforms, in
Just
the
yeah,
editing thing, and it's like, shit, my track, there's a lot of waves there. Like, shut up, dude.
yep.
Let him talk.
Now you just do like 30-minute intros to your podcast so you can get all that out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or Romas, right? I do
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I started the Romas. It's like people want to hear these stories, but not in the middle of an interview with someone else, who's
Right.
got their thing that I want them to have time to talk about. Anyway, enough about me. So, what do you think about me?
What do I think about you? I think that people want to hear more from you than they do from guests
Yeah,
on your
sometimes.
show, honestly.
Depends on the guest.
So you've interviewed your parents, right? And
I interviewed my mother and my sister. I've interviewed a lot of people in my family. I didn't interview my dad, which, um, yeah, it's a strange thing. Like, my dad was ill already when I started my podcast. He died 7 years ago. And when, like, initially I didn't interview him because I didn't interview anyone in my family in
Mm,
the first few years, because I think it was hard for me to sort of negotiate that, right? Like, um, I felt like the podcast was very much I wanted it to be about the guest, not me. And, um, I have an ego issue. Yeah, I mean, I think it's healthy, but I'm always struggling with, like, who gives a fuck, dude? Who gives a fuck about you and your thing and your this and your that? Like, I don't. I think I have a healthy aversion to being in the spotlight too much.
mm,
And in those days I was getting a lot of spotlight, right?
yeah.
That was pitching TV shows, and I was on documentaries all the time and doing speaking events and all that. And so the podcast was kind of a way to turn the spotlight outward onto other people. And I didn't want it to be personal because I was still also kind of learning how to deal with fame, you
Mm,
know, uh, and I didn't want to invite strangers into my family.
yeah.
And so for the first 2 years, I didn't interview anyone in my family. And then by the time I got more comfortable with it, he was older, obviously, and but old, seriously older, and I felt very protective of him,
Mm,
and that maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
yeah.
You know how it is when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
someone on your podcast who isn't a public person, you're exposing them in a way, to a lot of trolls and shitheads, and you know, people might. Now I've sort of shaped my podcast audience in a way that I've
Yeah.
eliminated the idiots,
Right.
and so
I was just going to say that I feel like so comfortable on this podcast because I'm like, oh, everyone listening is cool. Like
yeah,
you've burned off all the
I've
shitheads,
I've
and
burned them off, and
I
and
will
I've
have
kicked them
dinner with
out.
anyone listening here because I know you've spent so much time like culling the herd and like finding
Yeah,
like, it's a cool group. But yeah,
yeah,
before that happens, I mean, I know exactly what you mean where you're exposing yeah, you're exposing your parents and you want them to do well and they're not necessarily trained on what to share, what not to share, how to
right,
do that. And I mean, I feel that now, right? Like I've spent so much time writing exactly how I feel about my parents, and there are some very exposing moments in the book, but I've spent so much time with every single word that now, as I'm just talking about them, we're just shooting the shit here. It's actually a lot scarier for me
right,
because this is a first draft, right?
right.
Like, I don't want to be more disrespectful than is actually true. And so you kind of feel like you're on a tightrope walk when you're just doing it on a podcast, whereas in a book, it's on your turf, so to speak.
Yeah,
So, but I mean, this
yeah,
is nice because everyone, I think there's a lot of goodwill on this kind of show. But I can't, you know, going on another one, right, where people talk about like, going on Sam Harris's podcast, and then he's debating them, and then they get like a tsunami of hate from all of
right.
his listeners. And you're like, Jesus Christ, like it's intense out there.
I used to get that when I would go on Rogan's podcast,
Right.
because like I'm not a fighter or whatever the fuck their normal thing is, and so I'd go on his podcast, and it would just be like I'd get a lot of emails, or I'd see comments like that fucking douchebag,
Yeah.
fucking old creepy
Yeah.
mother, and
Yeah.
it's just like, oh jeez. Yeah, so it took me a long time to kind of like figure out like, oh, I can choose my audience to some extent. It's going to be a lot smaller, but I don't give a shit. Those trolls aren't giving me anything. They're not paying $5 a month, they're not, whatever, using my Amazon link, or like there's no value in having 50,000 shitheads and 5,000 good people listening to your podcast. Like,
Mhm.
just get rid of the shitheads and stick with your 5,000 or 10 or whatever it is. Um, yeah. So anyway, if my dad were alive now, I would have him on the podcast for sure. But at the time, it wasn't the right thing to do. And,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I've had my mom, I've had my aunt, my uncle, Uncle Dan, who just died. You knew him, right?
Of
You
course.
think you met him. Um,
Hi,
yeah,
hi, I'm Dan. You look like someone I'd like to meet.
right.
That
Exactly.
was his pickup line, right?
Yeah,
Which is such a non-pickup line. It's just such a
exactly.
harmless and incredible
It's the
way
anti-pickup line.
way to introduce yourself to women.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've come around to that, and I'm glad. Like when I interviewed my mom and my sister, it was interesting. I asked them both if they ever thought I was gay,
Mm.
and they both said yes. And I was like, really? That was kind of a joke question. Really? Like, yeah, we thought you were gay. It's like, okay, well,
Really?
yeah.
That's just early proclivity towards sex generally?
No, it was when I was in college and
Mm,
I was hanging out. My best friend was gay, and we hung out a lot. And I actually lived in his place for a while, and we were very very close.
mm,
And so I understand why someone would think that. And I've had a lot of gay men who were very close friends over the years.
mm,
So I don't think they thought I was explicit or exclusively gay. I think they probably thought I was bi.
mm.
Because
Interesting.
I think most people did. Like when I was in college, I think, most people, I don't know. I mean, I don't, I think I'm kind of, in touch with my feminine energy, but I don't think I come across as gay necessarily.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a very manly man, Kyle. I don't know
It's
if
very
you've
clear. Yeah.
noticed
Now
that.
that
Yeah.
you're in Crestone, chopping wood,
Chopping wood and, killing
thunderstorms, killing squirrels. Yeah.
varmints. I got guns. Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah.
I've had this thought. I went out to Burning Man this last year, and I had the thought it it makes that culture makes straight guys so much more comfortable to be in their feminine and be gay and or just have just play with that energy more
Mm.
in a way that normal society doesn't get. Like it's just such a hypersexualized culture, Burning Man. Everyone, it's so free and open. I wonder how many guys are bi but have never given themselves the chance to actually explore that. It's like the great Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about being on the hotel bed and he's watching Magic Mike, Matthew McConaughey and Channing Tatum, and it's a movie about male strippers, and McConaughey goes up on stage and he's like, "Now it is against the law to touch any of the performers, but I see a lot of lawbreakers out there." And Louis like, "And I didn't get a boner, but my cock just kind of turned over, unfurled." So I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm gay. Like
Yeah.
he does such a good job playing with that. Like I'm in my 50s. I don't know if I'm gay. Like it's just I feel like you have a good perspective on. I guess the question is like how many guys are bi but have not ever been in a situation where they can explore that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's a complicated question. You know, I mean, if uh, almost all guys watch porn, right? Which means that almost all guys spend a fair amount of time watching other men having sex. So that's always seemed kind of strange to me. Um, that it's seen as a marker of extreme heterosexuality that you watch other guys having sex a lot like that. There's something confusing in that.
Yeah. And
Um,
and that so much of what is seen as ultimate male heterosexuality, like um, rappers with their shirts off, six pack, glistening muscles,
Grabbing their
fucking
balls,
grabbing their balls, the fucking
right?
the Rogan world, right? It's like
Jujitsu,
all
like a lot
pretty
of
fucking gay.
wrestling. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time spent. I mean, I think that's why I'll never go on Rogan's show again, because last time I was on, I was like, I don't know, dude, like you spend an awful lot of time in the company of men in locker rooms, in gyms. Like, I, I mean, I'm not saying you're gay, but
uh,
I got better places to be than a fucking stinky ass gym with a bunch of dudes. Yeah.
well, and
Yeah.
and like how many you probably know way more about this. You for sure know way more about this than I do. But like other historical cultures where being bisexual was more accepted in male culture, and even like Greek kind of pedophilia stuff, like how much of
Yeah.
it is just culture versus our own innate sexual desires.
Yeah, I mean that's such a complicated question, right? Because there are innate appetites, but how they're expressed is so mitigated by culture that it becomes very complicated and confusing. Like the whole idea of, gay identity is quite recent. It's like
Hmm.
from the 1800s was the first incidents, recorded incidents of someone being called a homosexual,
Hmm.
right? Before that, there were homosexual relationships, there were homosexual acts, but a homosexual, like he is a,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know,
It
like
became
that's
it became a noun for the first time.
right,
Yeah.
right. It's
We
and
were
that's a
always just
confusing
becoming
thing.
before that we were always just becoming homosexual. We're
or acting
yeah,
homosexually, you
yeah.
know. you yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like the difference between being drunk and being a drunk,
Mm.
it's like, well, you can be drunk on a Saturday night, it doesn't make you a drunk,
Right.
it's
Yeah. It's like Irish culture versus American culture. It's like no one's an alcoholic over there. We're just like we're just drinking, man.
right. We're
There's no problem with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I read a really interesting thing the other day that I didn't know, that there was a brigade or division. I don't know the military terminology, but that somebody had the idea in the Roman army that it would be clever to have, I think it was 150 gay couples fighting in the same unit. And the idea being they would fight to the death because they were all defending their lover. They were defending their partner. So
Whoa.
they would be like the most fearsome. And they were the most feared unit of the Roman army, the gay brigade.
The
Yeah.
gay brigade. The brigade. Brigade.
Here we
That's
come.
so fucking funny. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And you
Oh.
mentioned the Greeks, and
Yep.
the Greeks are an example. It's like, okay, so you're a straight man, with property, you're an upper class straight man. So you have sex with boys for pleasure. You only have sex with women for procreation. So, but you're straight. Like there's no like you're not marginal. You're not different. You're standard issue upper class man. So what the fuck is that? Do we say those guys were bi? Were they straight? Were they what? If you ask them, they would say I'm a normal man,
Yeah.
right? So it's very strange. And they're I remember telling this story to Dan Savage early on. We were talking about this issue of like how sexual identity changes and over culture and time. And I told him about this culture in Papua New Guinea in the mountains that believe that the essence of masculinity is semen. And so the young, like tough young men who want to grow up to be warriors
Chug a lot.
ingest as much as they possibly can. And they don't consider it to be anything that's normal behavior, right? So, and I remember Dan sort of nodding and saying, no, where exactly is this tribe?
Yeah. The coordinates were again?
Yeah.
Looking
Yeah.
for a
Could you
friend.
drop a pin maybe?
Yeah, but it's dude, Burning Man. I mean, I know people talk about it all the time, but it's amazing how quickly people change their behavior. Just you get into costume. But there's naked dudes, naked women, like the and also for women, right? It's there is no slut shaming, right? Um the willingness to be more openly sexual there is incredibly pronounced because the opportunity is just everywhere. There was actually the people probably saw it on the news, but the day before the gates opened this year, there was a huge storm
Yeah.
with 60-mile-an-hour wind. People who had been going there for 20 years said this was the worst storm they had ever seen. And much of what was already set up at Burning Man was the theme camps, the camps that take a week or two to set up beforehand.
Yeah.
And so they got the brunt of this storm. It sounded really scary. People were holding down these geodesic domes from just getting blown down the street, like crazy huge storm. And one big camp at Burning Man is called the Orgy Dome. It's a place where you can go actually have orgies. And it just got absolutely demolished in this storm. So what uh, the owners of that camp did is once Burning Man opened, they just put out a single small Coleman tent that said, "We got fucked too hard in the storm. Go in the tent instead." So it was like a joke, but like all there was this single Coleman, like 3-person Coleman tent for people to go in and have fucking orgies.
Well, God, that tells you God doesn't like
God,
orgies.
yes, exactly. That is
That's how I
God's
read that.
will.
Yeah. All right, we veered way off topic here, Kyle. I-
Is this not tangentially speaking?
Yeah, yeah. Unless you're going to bring this back to, your parents somehow.
I
How are
really
you going to get from Orgy Dome back to ET?
ask your parents how was I
If they've ever
conceived?
been to the Orgy Dome.
How have I been conceived? I do think that asking parents. One guy who I interviewed in the book, Derek Sivers, who I think you would really like this guy. He's very thoughtful. He's written a number of books, and I he said that when he was younger, he interviewed, or he was. This is the story he told. He said his grandfather was on his deathbed, and the whole time he had this big unaskable question for his grandfather, which was, "What's it like to know that you're about to die?" And he was really afraid to ask the question the whole time, but by the end, he worked up the courage, and his grandfather looked at him and said, "It's wonderful. Everything else in my life has been great, and I think this is going to be great too." And they had
Mm,
shared this beautiful moment, and then the next day, his grandfather died. The point of him telling me the story was that now he said, I make a habit of asking the big, scary question. Uh, that thing that you are too afraid to ask is probably the thing that you should be asking. And in any good interview, there's a tension that between you and your parent. There should be like, oh, I really want to know this about you, but I'm afraid to ask it. uh, Ask it. And one directive that I give is like, spend 20 minutes, set a timer, and write down all the questions that you're too afraid to ask your parents. And one of those might be about sex. I would be willing to bet that a lot of this curiosity is around like, how do you think about sex? Who were former lovers before my own parent? Like I think that normalizing talking about sex with our parents can close the distance, and some of those more quote unquote taboo questions can give way to both humor and a bit more depth.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Was there a chapter? I don't remember that chapter. How to talk to your mom about her sex life?
I did not know, it's not a chapter, but man, I've written so many drafts. There was a point where we were talking a bit about sex in one interview, but we I don't know that it actually made it in to the book. But I feel grateful that I've always kind of maintained open communication around that topic, and there was never a point when we just stopped talking about it, uh,
Yeah.
which I think is, I was really lucky in that sense that I've always had a fairly open relationship to be able to ask them about anything. And I think that it also speaks a lot to um, how I knew that they would be supportive of the project, that which is huge. Throughout the whole book, they knew that I needed to do this. So we get into some fairly personal things in later chapters in the book, and for them to just be open to contribute meant a huge amount to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And to them, I'm sure, because I mean, that's the thing, right? That's the symbiosis of this whole discussion that we're having, that there's a, a generosity in being curious and asking, and there's a generosity in answering and sharing. And like, one of the things I always think about, there's a great book called The Continuum Concept about how hunter gatherers parent. I always give it as a gift to friends of mine who are, going to have kids, because it's such a beautiful book. But anyway, one of the things that the author talks about is how in this hunter gatherer tribe she was living in, a child when a child expresses interest in doing something, that indicates that she's ready.
Hmm.
So when a kid's like, I want to go fishing, like, okay, then it's time for you to go fishing. I want to climb a tree. Okay, well, let's get you up that tree. Like, you don't push them
Hmm.
and you don't hold them back. Their expression of interest in something is an indication of their readiness to undertake it.
Oh,
And
that's so
so,
cool.
and it makes sense. It seems
Hmm.
so obvious, but think about what we do. Don't do that. You're not old enough. All this like pushing and pulling. And I was thinking about that in terms of what you're saying, the questions one could ask one's parents, like when the kid comes and says, "Mom, who was your boyfriend before dad?" That indicates that the kid's ready to hear that information,
Right.
whereas previous to that, maybe they weren't, and that's why they weren't asking. So there is something organic about this process.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And uh, yeah, I gotta get. I had not thought about that in those terms, but my dad, ET, did a really good job with his kids around that. It was just don't hold them back. If they want to go skateboard down that hill, just put a helmet on their head, but say go for it. You just don't stamp out that initial curiosity.
Right.
He talks a lot about how that was one of the harder things for him being a parent because of the pressure that he felt from other parents saying, "Don't let your kids do that. You're gonna fuck them up. I can't believe you're doing." Like there
Right.
is, I haven't experienced this yet, but the social pressure of what it means to be a good parent
Yeah.
leads parents to do things that they might not inherently feel is right, but culture is telling them is right.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let your kid just scream and cry until he, gives up and falls asleep. Like,
Yeah.
from a primate perspective, that doesn't seem wise.
Right.
But
This was, my mom's talked about this that like she grew up in was it Dr. Spock? Was that the
yeah,
thing, right? Where
yeah,
you just are taught to let them cry it out. And her own mother did that with her. And she said it was like, I never had a close relationship with her as a result. There's just this distance, uh, because yeah, early on we were taught not to comfort and be nurturing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Kyle Thiermann, congratulations. You're a fucking author, man.
Oh man. Yeah, no, it's hopefully the first of many. I think that it's just fun, man. I really enjoy the writing process. I find it to be an incredibly good time, and I'm feel grateful that I found it. That's feel
So when
great.
you're sitting next to someone on an airplane, on a flight, and they say, "So what do you do for a living?" Are you going to say author?
Yeah, I'd say Okay. Oh God.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. I can't do it. It's hard. It's like I can say I'm a writer, but
Mm,
to say I'm an author, I'm a public intellectual. You know, it's
so
just like
pretentious. It's so
it's pretty
it's
pretentious.
so pretentious. Yeah,
But
but
I don't know if that's just my hang up, you know. I mean, I am an author, I guess. So are you.
yeah. One thing that was a good time for me, and I think I found a bit more of my voice through this book, is staying close to the kind of writing that I like. Because one seductive trap is to start using big words unnecessarily, and you stop writing for the audience and you start writing to look as smart as you can.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of I can see a lot of authors, they stop going by Ken and start going by Kenneth, right? Like it's really easy to stop just writing in the way that you like to write and start going for the, well, I need to look as smart as I can. And for me, I like humor. David Sedaris is one of my main guys, and before I start writing sessions, I'll pretty often read a few pages of one of his books,
Mm,
and I'll start on my own tone. Uh,
right.
that's been really helpful for me because then even the hardest, if it's really difficult material to get into or uncomfortable, I can think, okay, how would he handle this material?
Excellent model for you. I never thought about that, but he also writes a lot about his family. Very intimate, revealing, but funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 that's very close to the tone that you got in this book. Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, now I realize you were just copying David
Yeah.
Sedaris.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
Just a huge plagiarizing.
And that's why it sounded kind of gay too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Are you going to wear a kilt? You see, he wears like kilts and stuff when he goes on talk shows. It's hilarious.
He's so amazing and just
He's,
walks like 15 miles a day picking up trash. Until
yeah.
recently, he would always write on a typewriter. I got a letter from him. I wrote Sedaris
Uh huh.
uh, and told him that I had been attacked by a sea otter, which is a true story. It happened a couple months ago. I was out surfing, and there was a domoic acid event that happened in the ocean, which basically it's a high level of phytoplankton that makes certain sea mammals go crazy, and seals were attacking surfers, sea otters were going insane. It like basically turns these typically mellow sea mammals into like rabid creatures. And
Fuck.
I was paddling in surfing, and this I see the sea otter pops his little head up like 15 feet away from me, goes down, pops up again, and grabs onto my foot. I had a booty on, but just tried to sink its teeth into my feet. And I was like, ah, fucking freak out. I paddling as fast as I can. I was like, holy shit, that was terrifying. And then it was like 2 weeks later, I just realized, like, oh yeah, David Sedaris accepts letters. So I just wrote him this little story about getting attacked by a sea otter. And then a month or two later, he wrote me back and was like, Kyle, I've never known that sea otters could attack humans, but I'm so happy. I'll keep that in mind for the future. I'm like, oh, that's I have a little letter on my fridge.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And he actually sent like an email or
That
on
was like a
paper.
handwritten letter. He does
Wow.
handwritten letters to people.
That's fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Unless you have something else you want to say here, I'm going to stop recording.
No, but yeah, man. I mean, as you know, as everyone knows, man, it's just it's a it's a great fucking I just think you're an awesome dude, Christopher Ryan. I'm really happy
Oh,
you came into my life, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
well, I didn't just stumble into your life, man. You plotted it. You had it all worked out. You sent me that perfectly crafted email from the young aspiring podcaster, and then you came and whipped up your famous beat tacos, and who can resist?
Who can resist from there? But yeah, anyone out there, if you're in, we're going to be doing a store tour at Patagonia stores, as well as Mudwater. You just go onto my Instagram. We're going to be doing a bunch of them in different states, and if you're around, I would love to see you at the events. So.
And you have a podcast. I can never remember the name of it. What's it
Oh
called?
God, yeah, Tangentialites. It's called the Kyle Tierman Show because I couldn't think of the name.
That's it. The Kyle Thiermann Show, ladies and gentlemen.
God,
It's a long-standing, long-running podcast featuring many interesting folks of
mostly
various walks
Chris.
of life.
Mostly Chris.
Mostly me and Neil Strauss. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Kyle. Good luck with the book, and never forget, man. The book's like a child, right? You've given birth. You got to let it go now. People are gonna have their own relationships with the book that has nothing to do with you. That was a big lesson for me, learning not to take people's reactions to the book personally.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
I'm on to the next one now. I think I've got. I've heard Neil say that he won't read his book after it comes out.
mm,
He's done with it, and sure you might need to do readings or something like that, but then it's in the past. Move on to the
yeah,
next thing.
I think that's pretty smart. Yeah, I've never sat down and read through either of my books. Did you do an audiobook? You did, didn't you?
We did, yeah. Audiobook is out on Audible, and one thing that you might be interested in actually is this was a recommendation from Adam Skolnick, who did the David Goggins book, and in between chapters, they do mini podcasts. So it's a conversation between he and Goggins, and they move on to the next chapter. In mine, many of the people in the book and the interviews I did, I recorded as podcasts. So between the chapters, there are little 5 minute snippets of
Mm,
a conversation that I'm having with them. And it, I think, made it way more dynamic, way more fun to just break up the monotonous, nasally metallic tone between each chapter that I have. Uh,
uh-huh.
but I mean, given how many podcasts you've done, dude, I mean, I think you could do a book on what's the theme of the whole thing, and then take little bits of conversations and put it
Right.
between an audiobook. It's a
Yeah.
huge opportunity for people like us who have done hundreds of podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. All right, let's
Pile
go.
of shit.
Pile Tierman, Kyle Tierman. The book is One Last Thing or One Last Question.
One last question before you go.
One last question before you go. Pick it up. Is available in bookstores or mainly online?
Mainly on Amazon, but if you want to go into your bookstore and request it, they will order it.
They'll order it. Okay, cool. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.